guidance. After reflecting on their language learning history, we start to share some different resources and methods. And this is something that I do throughout the course, but there's an initial kind of sharing session that I contribute to with tools and methods that I know about and that I ask students to contribute to in terms of peer sharing. And this goes on throughout the course, as I said, but we start it right at the beginning. And then we start to think about the kinds of goals that we have. The students identify things that they'd like to be doing in a year, in 2 years, after graduation. It's up to them, the time frame that they can think about. And then they start to think of goals that they would like to achieve in a short-term project. And I'll tell you more about the short-term projects that we do soon. When the students identify their short-term goals, they learn how to make SMART plans. SMART is an acronym. I don't know if you've heard of it before. If anyone thinks they know what the S and the M and the A and the R and the T stand for, maybe you can type it into the chat in Facebook and you'll get the answers down the track. Bonus points if you get this one. And then finally, we move into this cycle that just keeps going and going of planning, action, and reflection cycles. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. And I think there's a role that teachers can play here in guiding students through these planning, action, reflection cycles. And hopefully the idea is that the students will eventually take over and start doing that themselves. They'll take control of those planning, action, reflection cycles. Okay. So for the language learning history, here's something that I put in Moodle. Moodle is the way that I communicate with students in the self-directed learning course. We had face-to-face classes and used Moodle. And when we had to go online, we just put everything onto Moodle so that all interactions through here now, through Moodle and Zoom. So I'll give you a moment to read through here. You can see some blue parts. They have links to different parts of Moodle, or they have links to videos that students can watch, or they have links to files that students can read. And basically you can see the assignment here is that students have an opportunity to see a model of others talking about their language learning history. And after that, they share their language learning history with myself and their classmates. And generally, the students, the histories that I've read, generally the students talk about how old they were when they started learning certain languages, what kind of situation it was in. For example, was it with family members or was it in a school system through formal education? They often write about their feelings about it, whether they initially liked or didn't like the language they were studying. And if there was a turning point, they tend to write about that as well. And I found that I've learned quite a lot from knowing about my students' language learning history. But the most important thing is not actually for me to know and remember each student's experiences as such. It's an opportunity for them to reflect on the experiences they've had to date and maybe question where they've come from before they think about where they want to go in the future. And that brings us to this part here, thinking of your future self. So I talked about introducing students to the idea of getting down their long-term and their short-term goals. So I get them to start thinking about what they want to be like in the future. I ask them questions like, what can future you do in English in a year or when you graduate? Thinking of really concrete things like if they're going to be using English for their job or will they be traveling with it? Some of them write about things like, oh, I will have TOEIC score such and such, like I will have TOEIC score 800. But I really encourage them to think, okay, so you've got that score. What will you do with that? What is it you actually need English for? What does that TOEIC score unlock for you in the future? And we have discussions about this in class and they have time to write about it. So I give them an assignment like this. And you can see I've given them two choices. When they put it in a Word file, it comes just to me. Maybe they don't want to share this with everybody. But if they put it in the forum discussion, it means that they're sharing it with their classmates and other people can read it too and comment back. So I leave that decision to the students because I think that's, their personal choice to make. So getting them to think about this at the beginning is something that I incorporate into the course, this self-directed learning course. I do also ask my students in my regular courses about this. They're really trying hard in their university life to improve their English skills. And I ask them sometimes, okay, why? Why are you doing this? And this is connected to motivation too. If they can regularly come back and think about what they're doing it for, if they can look ahead and then start making plans to get there, it can be very empowering. So here's time to check. Aziz, did anybody put down an S, an M, or an A, or an R, or a T in the chat? I'm going to tell the answers now.
Yes.
So the S, when we're making a
Yes, just
plan,
go ahead.
yeah, the S when we make a plan is specific. And so imagine that you're um, thinking about what you can do in order to improve your English skills. And maybe you want to improve, for example, your listening skills for some purpose that you have in the future. Maybe you're preparing for a certain exam. Uh, Maybe it's because you're going to have a job interview and you know it's going to be face to face and you want to do well in the job interview, whatever it is. The S in specific means that you're thinking about how it fits in to your plans and you're identifying the need for it and you're saying what you're doing this for. Why are you doing this activity? And you're saying in detail. And the M part of your plan is measurable. So if, for example, you had a weekly plan, in that week, you could say how many minutes you'd spend doing different tasks or how many times you would do the tasks within the week. Because if you just say, I'm going to watch TED Talks, it's undefined. How do you know? After 1 minute, maybe you achieved it. After 1 hour, did you achieve it yet? I'm not sure. So I ask the students to be measurable. Achievable,
Exactly.
yeah, right. Achievable refers to whether or not they're putting down a plan that is actually going to be possible for them. They have to think about their time management, their total activities in the week. My students have part time jobs, they do club activities, they have homework from other uh, subjects, and they have quite busy schedules all in all. They need time to relax. And they often come in with so much energy to make these plans, and they at the beginning say, "Okay, I'm going to do TED Talks for 3 hours." Are you? Are you going to have time to do that? Have you been using TED Talks before? Are you used to listening for 3 hours to English? No. Okay. So how about we drop it down? But I don't tell them they have to. I suggest, how about you choose something that you think's possible, based on perhaps what you've done before, or the goal that you have, or your desire to do it, the likelihood that you think that you will enjoy it. What would be the best for you? And I really push them not to try to please me. I tell them repeatedly, I'm not here to say to you that your plan is better if you're spending more hours studying. That's not it at all. Every student in the class can have a different amount of time that they want to dedicate to their plan. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have the same amount of time as your classmates. Just make sure it's something that you think is going to be possible for you in terms of time management, and also that the level is going to be good for you. It's something that's going to be possible for you to do um, within the time frame and at your level. So relevant is really looking at um, how it fits within your goals. So you've talked, for example, if a student has talked about wanting to build their skills so that they can get a high score on the reading section of the TOEFL IBT, but they didn't do anything in their plan that really links to that goal, then they have to question the relevance. Um, they might prefer watching Netflix, and that's okay. That might be relevant to another goal within their life. and they might want to do that as part of their plan, and that's totally okay. But maybe they have to go back and think a little bit about the the goal that they're setting as their short-term goal and expand it a little bit more. So relevance really looking at how the activity that they want to do fits with the goals that they've stated that they want to achieve. And then finally, time bound. If there's a deadline, we work harder generally. And so having a finish point can really be helpful. In the self-directed learning course that I teach, we do 4 or 5 week plans, and we check them every week. So the 1 week interval tends to be the time bound part. But we also do plans during the summer vacation, and then the students can be more flexible on the time. They might break up their summer vacation into 2 or 3 periods, or they might still continue to do weekly plans. As long as they have a deadline for their tasks, that's okay. So that's the overview of the SMART plan. And so if I'm thinking about the cycle I was talking about, and I said there's planning, then there's action, and there's reflection, this is the planning part of it. They're making their plan, they're deciding what they're going to do, and after that, they're going to carry it out. So looking at the cycle as a whole, they come up with their long-term and short-term goals. They find tasks that they think will help them get there. They list the tasks in the SMART way that we just looked at. They take action outside of class, hopefully, and usually they do. When they come back the next week, or these days through Moodle, when they post to the forum or they talk in Zoom, they discuss the action or the inaction in class. And I put the inaction in brackets there. I would say in a lot of cases, students don't achieve everything that they did, especially when they're first learning how to make the plans. But as they get better and they become more focused, or they become more capable of addressing the A part, the achievable, and setting realistic plans, there tends to be more action than inaction. But in class, when we reflect on inaction, it's not the case of saying, well, you did a terrible job. It's never that. It's a case of asking, okay, well, what was it that made you not do it? Was it a time management issue? Was it because you really don't like that task? Is there another task you could do that could help you to achieve the same goal? And it's a task that you'd actually commit to. So we look at the reasons behind the inaction in group discussions. And that's part of their reflection. And they reflect after class and they think about that a little bit. And then if they need to, when they have got to their second week of the plan, maybe they make a change to the plan. Maybe they modify the amount of time, or maybe they swap one task for another task. And then they continue the cycle. So this is the planning, action, reflection cycle that they do. And I've done lots of variations of this. There was a variation of this in my PhD, but it didn't have SMART then because I wasn't smart enough to include it. And there have been variations of that I've done of this at Meiji with my my speaking class students, my TOEFL class students, and also at Gakushuen that I've done with my self-directed learning students. And I found that this kind of guidance has had a positive impact in many cases. I can see some level of positive impact with the students, and in some cases a very positive impact. So I'm encouraged to keep using it. If you want to read more about how I used this kind of cycle in different contexts, you can take a look at this article here that I published after a Eurocall conference a few years ago. You can either go through to the QR code or through the URL. Take a look at this later if you're interested. And here's another set of data that I wanted to share with you about how actions from teachers has an impact on students. So one thing that I found in my PhD was that some students were making changes. I told you before that I taught them for a year and then I didn't have interaction with them for 6 months and I followed up. And I found that some of the students were able to take the things that they'd learned in the course and keep working on their English skills autonomously, and they were still using digital technology for that. But I found that other students were not. And so I wanted to know what the difference was. And from interviews, I'm thinking of one student in particular now. She felt that it hadn't really been long enough. She'd had the chance to have that support in her first year of university. And she'd felt that when she got to the second year of university, that kind of support system had broken away. And she thought that an important role of the teachers was missing in the second year. So I could see a kind of need for more teacher support. So I later looked at whether one semester or 2 semesters made any difference to students in a self-directed learning course. And I found that there was stronger agreement in the second semester with the same students about being able to identify their short-term and long-term goals, make learning plans that address those goals, find study materials, know some resources that they can use to achieve their goals. And it didn't change for finding new resources. I wasn't sure of the reason because I didn't interview them, but I could see that there were enough benefits here by doing it for 2 semesters rather than 1 that I felt quite convinced that it was beneficial to help students long term rather than just give them the tools and say, okay, off you go now. I think that there's a real need here for teachers to help a little longer. This is just a page that I've screenshotted from my Moodle. I think this is from this year's one. Yeah, it is. And you can see the kinds of things that we do. So there's a self-introduction forum at the beginning to get to know each other, the language learning history, the future me. Students sometimes want to share resources, and so they put up links to any TED Talks that they thought were interesting after one of the other students said that she didn't know anything decent to watch on TED. They share their learning plans so that they can read each other's plans. They talk in Zoom breakout rooms about the plans, and each week they go back and they reflect together. They say how they did on that week and if they want to make any changes for the next week. And there's a focus on what they do for vocabulary and reading. So they report back on what they've been doing to build their vocabulary and to increase their reading. You can see something listed as motivation forum. And the students, when we got to about the middle of the course, we were thinking about how we could stay motivated, and the students shared their top secrets of what motivates them when they're running out of motivation. And they shared all kinds of things like video links and songs and quotations that motivate them, or people that had inspired them, those types of things. And you can see that there are some sections for presentations. So there's the final presentation where students talk about what they learned during their project. So for example, the 4-week learning plan, the students go off and study outside of class for those 4 weeks. They come back and they reflect on that experience in a presentation that they share with everybody. And then they make their learning plan for the summer break. You can see that there's another 2 links, one of them self-assessment. In self-directed learning, there's got to be something that gets the learner to go back and think themselves about what they've done well and what they haven't done well. So I embed a survey in here for them to think themselves about the areas that they want to get stronger on and the areas that they've done really well with. And then finally, just a little bit of feedback for me as a teacher in the bottom link. So these are some of the basic things that teachers could share if they wanted with students in their courses, whether it be a self-directed learning course or another course in which they want to embed a strand for self-directed learning. Okay, before we move on to the second part, which is the technology use, I wonder if there are any questions to address, Aziz?
Yes, there are a couple of comments on the Facebook Live.
Could you read them? Because I can't see Facebook while I've got screen share on, so.
Okay, let me. So you mentioned the, the motivation part, the future self. Do you think students, when we involve them in when they share their objectives, especially using the smart plan, as you have said, they will their learning will get maximized.
I can't say for sure that it does or it doesn't get maximized because I'm not there to see in the future what happens with the students.
It's not
However,
measurable.
students, yeah, I haven't done any longitudinal studies with the students since I started using that future self idea. Um, but I have had anecdotal feedback from students during class. For example, that motivation link that I mentioned to you before, some of the students wrote that they just imagine themselves when they are when they've graduated and what they're doing, and it makes them keep going, for example. And when students were writing the future self, well, when they were writing about their future selves, some of them said to me that it wasn't something they'd sat down and taken time to do before, that they hadn't thought about this before. And doing it gave them a good opportunity to reflect and to think about what they were going to do. And it helped them to want to keep going. We actually, in one of my courses last week, there's this website called Future Me. Future Me, and you can write a letter to yourself, an email to yourself. You put your email address in and you can set the date, and that will be delivered to you on that date. And we did that this round for the first time. I hadn't done it before, but this semester we did that for the first time at the beginning of a 5-week learning plan. And I gave students the choice of either writing to themselves, at the end of the 5 weeks and having it delivered then. So, how did they think they were going to do? And that it comes to their mailbox, or doing it at the end of the year, or doing it when they graduate. And students, some of them wrote two of them because they were just kind of curious to see what would end up in their inbox at the end of the date that they'd selected in the future. Some of them, I told them to, you don't have to use this website. Some people, for security, don't want to put information there. So I suggested they write the letter to themselves and then they set an alarm on their phone for the future. So maybe if it's going to be 5 weeks later, they put something in their schedule that says check that letter, and they have an opportunity to go back and look at what they'd written. So that was another way of getting them to think about their future selves and to kind of, I don't know, to integrate that into their thoughts of how they will be, and maybe in some way to have an impact on their motivation.
Yes, writing this letter, as you have mentioned, it should be they should take into consideration the smart, right?
Right. Yeah, well, it could. It could. I read some of the letters people had written to themselves on the Future Me site, and they're not all about language learning. I mean, very few of them were that I read. They're about all different kinds of life goals. But I think the important thing about this kind of self-directed learning role, or facilitator role, that teachers can play, I think the important thing is that we're not just preparing students for um, language learning. It's transferable. If you start using this kind of, I mean, myself as a person, not necessarily as a teacher, if I start using these kinds of things myself, I could do it for my career, I could do it for my family, I could do it for my language learning, I could do it for my fitness and health. We can make long-term and short-term goals. We can take steps towards them, and then we can evaluate that and make changes. So I think that there's a lot of benefits for it, not just within language learning, but also in other aspects of our lives. And students notice that too. A lot of students mention that to me.
Uh, I love the part when you talk. We mentioned the reflection. So,
Yeah.
so do you think it's important to always push students to get into this reflective practice,
Yes, for sure, for sure.
especially in language learning?
For sure. And I'm not confident that there's a lot of that happening in high schools here, because I've talked with students who said, I've never thought about this before. So I think that there's a role for teachers to take at all levels of education, where they ask students to take a moment to think about things that they've done, things that they want to do. Um, and us as educators too, obviously. I'm constantly thinking about what I've done that worked, what I've done that didn't work so well. I attend a lot of workshops to find out more about how other people are doing things. And I like to offer workshops too and get feedback from people in different contexts to myself so that I can broaden my understanding of what's happening within our field.
Yes,
Okay. So shall we move on to
yes,
the digital technology part?
yes, yes,
Okay, perfect. So I know that there are a lot of advantages to using technology for language learning, and I just wanted to go through a few of them. So first of all, you can study languages from all parts of the world. And like I told you before, I've been studying Italian quite a bit recently. So if you have language learners of different languages, you can also direct them to technology for that. When I studied French in high school and in university, there was nothing. You know, if I wanted to do extra listening practice, I had to go to my campus and I had to make a booking and I had to put in a cassette and I had to listen to that cassette on a topic that I didn't choose to listen to. And that's how I got my listening practice. But these days, students, language learners, they have many, many choices about the languages, the content of different languages that they want to learn. They have much more easy access than we did a generation ago. And they have choice over the kinds of things that they would like to use, the materials that they'd like to use. So, for some learners, they're really interested in improving their language skills through music or through social media or through sites that are designed to teach them grammar. There's a lot of variety in what we can access online. So, digital technology opens up a whole world of materials. They can study whenever they want, 24/7, as long as they have access to the internet. They can access new things. And if they've downloaded something, they don't even need access to the internet at the time that they want to use something. And they can access materials from different parts of the world. They may want to read about the news in English in their own country and then contrast that with the view of English in Singapore and in Australia and in, I don't know, India. So they can get different perspectives on the same thing. They can hear different accents in English, how English is used in different parts of the world. They might only have access to a very narrow I don't know, range of accents and so forth in their language classes, but get onto the internet and they can hear English as it's used by people all around the world and other languages too. And it can connect them to people. There are a lot of people all over the place that are using the target languages that our students have, and they can connect with others through the internet to use those languages. Of course, it's not perfect. Yeah, nothing's perfect. So there are things we have to avoid too. We can't just say, "Yay, technology." We have to step back and think about problems. And one of them, obviously, is security. And I think it's very important that as teachers, we address security with our students and don't just leave them to figure it out the hard way when they have a problem. So, talking about potential problems that can arise when using the internet, for example, if they are using their real name on social media and giving out personal details, if they are accepting, I don't know, if they're on a language exchange app and they haven't controlled their security settings well, they may have issues. So we need to have these kinds of discussions. And there is also the problem that we can have tech overload. As much as we want to help our students, we don't want to um, put them in a position where they have to learn to use too many tools to the point that they have 15 different logins and passwords for things just to take our courses. It can be very, very stressful.
yes,
It can take up data. It can not all students have the storage for all of the apps teachers might ask them to download onto their phone, for example. So we want tech to be something that students can use to support their learning, but we don't want to crush them with it. So this is something to think of. Um, but I think, and there are more you can think of, more advantages and more disadvantages, I'm sure. But let's just cover those at the moment, because I thought those were the ones that stood out the most. In the abstract that you read, I mentioned that there were different tools that I would introduce today for language learning. And I mean, there are many. It was difficult to decide what to choose. I tried to choose some ones that I don't think are super widely used everywhere, because they might be too obvious for people. But I did include a few of the obvious ones as well, with the hope that I could bring some new perspectives to them. So the first one here is lyrics training. A lot of students I teach, and myself as well, find that music doesn't get boring. They can listen to the same sentence 100 times in a way that they could never do it with a TOEIC listening exercise book. You're not going to listen to your TOEIC listening exercise book 100 times, but you'll listen to your favorite song. So there's a lot of motivation to listen to music among many students that I've taught. And this is a gamified version of well, as it's called, lyrics training, of training students or language learners to understand lyrics. On the App Store or Google Play, you can download it, or you can do this on a computer. It's different on the app version and the computer version. I'm going to show you the computer version today. So when you go into the site, you have a page like this, and you can choose the language. There are quite a number of languages. I've set it to English, but there's French and Italian, and maybe there are 10 or 12 languages now. It keeps evolving. And so you can put in the name of a singer or a musician, or you can put in the name of a song. So if I put in Bruno Mars, these songs would come up. And then I choose a game mode. And you can see here, it's a gap fill. It's a musical gap fill. And so 10% of the words are missing, or 25%, or 50, or expert, which is the are you crazy mode. And the truth is, I have some students who can do the expert mode and they can fill the whole song in, typing it as it goes. I often recommend this, even though it seems like it's got nothing to do with TOEFL. I often recommend this to my students because the TOEFL IBT is done on a computer, and they tend to not be very fast at typing when they start university, because they haven't been typing in English at all, basically, most of them. And they need to improve their typing skills. And this is a fast way and a fun way for them to do it. Anyway, you can choose one of the game modes. And you can see the bottom left, there's something that says karaoke. You can just use that to sing along. And it really just plays the words. And just like if you went to a karaoke booth where it's the part that you're supposed to sing, that becomes the color that's showing that the lyrics are at that part now, and you sing along. Anyway, in the game mode, you can see a red line at the top, and this is the lifeline, and it starts going down if you type the wrong letters or if you do nothing. So there's a bit of pressure for you to put in the words. And you can see that at the top, there's a part that says hits. That's if you get the word right. So in this gap fill, there are 29 gaps. And there are, at the moment, no hits because it's the beginning of the game. But if the student gets one right, they get a point here. And if they can't get it right and they skip, it counts as a fail. And their score goes up depending on how many hits they get. You can see here it says make the and some gap. You can see there are 5 dots there. That means there are 5 letters missing for the word. And if the student plays this game, it plays the song, and if it gets to the word shining and a student hasn't typed anything in, the song stops. And if they want to hear just this part again, they press the button on the left, the little arrow with the line on the left here, and it'll take them back to the word make, and they will hear that part of the song again. And they can do that as many times as they like, as long as the red line at the top doesn't get to the end. That means they're out. And if they really can't catch it, then they can press the button on the right-hand side, and that will tell them the name, tell them the missing word, rather, and that will count as a fail. So you can see here, there's a little red dot under the word complement. That's because the fail button was used. And then they get to the end and it says lyrics complete, the game's over, and they get a score on the scoreboard and they can play like this. A lot of my students have said that they really enjoy it. And I've gone through phases of playing it and not playing it in French and Italian. And I've learned a lot of vocabulary from it. And I've also, it might sound really weird. It doesn't seem like it's a grammar drill game, but because there are common prepositions, for example, that come after certain words, you get practice at seeing, oh, there's a gap of two. This is going to be the word on or in. And you start to make a connection with, for example, phrasal verbs or prepositions that appear after certain things. So in that sense, I think that's to some extent helping with even grammar. Although for me personally, it's been vocabulary more. The second thing I want to introduce is ELLO, ELLLO. And what I love about this is that there are people from all over the world that are participating. And you can see, oops, sorry, I just hit something by mistake. I'm trying to move the little menu that's at the bottom and blocking what I want to read. Yeah, there are materials that you can choose by nationality. So people who want to hear English spoken by people from lots of different other countries have the opportunity to do this. And you can see that there are on the top left there's grammar lessons, or there are conversation lessons. I'm talking the top right now that says views. So they have natural conversations that are done with people who are just talking quite naturally with each other. And something that a lot of my students use is the 1 minute English down the bottom left. It's short videos of people who talk about a topic for a minute, and it comes with a transcript if you want it. You can hide the transcript or see the transcript. You can take a short comprehension quiz at the end if you want to, or you can just listen to them. My students use it for things like shadowing, or they listen to it and then they try to talk about the topic themselves for a minute. So they use it as a speaking prompt task. And some students who are going to go to certain countries, they listen to people from those countries. I have a lot of students being in Japan. Some of my students go, for example, to I don't know, places like Singapore or Vietnam because they're very close. They've done English courses there in the summer, for example, and there's really no opportunity here to listen to that so much, to the English of people spoken in those regions. So this kind of thing is a really great opportunity. So I think it's useful if you're looking for access to speakers of English from different parts of the world. And of course, there's the 1 minute grammar section. And so it's a short, sharp section that focuses on a grammar point, and students can use that as a refresher of grammar they've studied before, or to learn something that they don't know about different grammar points. Okay, so check it out if you're interested. Next one is fairy tales. Really simple stories, things that are familiar to some, like Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, something that's more original, like The Bird and the Whale, that, you know, it's not famous as a Disney story. And these are available in several languages. I think there might even be Spanish as well. Yeah, it is Spanish, French, Italian, and German, as well as English. And they've recently added it so that there are video versions of it too, and there are some quite cute animations, and that attracts some students' attention. But the key thing is that you can listen to the stories being told at a quite reasonable speed, not too fast, not too slow, and you can have the subtitles off or on. And if you're using Spanish, French, Italian, and German, it will give you the English translation, and you can hide that or unhide it. So if students are wanting to do some listening practice or some reading practice with something that's not a super high level, then this could be something you might like to direct them towards. Okay. The next one is kind of similar in a way. Um, it's using stories, but these stories are not designed for language learners. This site is actually created for kids, and it's reading stories the way that teachers read to primary school kids. And they've invited lots of famous people to come and read these stories to attract kids to watch it. Like, what's his name? Elijah Wood, the guy from Harry Potter. Um, no, Lord of the Rings. From Lord of the Rings, he was the Bilbo Baggins. So they tried to get people in to draw kids to the site, I think. But the great thing about it is that you can hear stories told with really emphasized intonation. And there are some materials that teachers can use to do project work if they want to, but thinking of this as something that students could use, autonomously outside of class. Um, they have the story, um, and they can turn on or off the subtitles. They have the story read to them, but they have the backup of pictures there too. So when they're meeting some of the new vocabulary, and you might think a children's story is not so complex, there's some really high level vocabulary in some children's stories. So it's something that I recommend to students who like um, like getting lost in stories, like that kind of feeling of just listening to a story or having a story told to them. And some students have said that they've enjoyed using this. The other thing is social media. Now, I use social media. That's one of my Twitter accounts. And you can see that it's got a few languages in there. I've since changed it because my mood has changed and I've been focusing on Italian. But at one point, when I first created this account, I was using it to build my kanji skills in Japanese. So I was following all these people in Japanese, and I every time I checked my news feed, I'd have the chance to read something of interest, and I was trying to tweet a bit. And then I moved over to French for a while. I think possibly because I had a conference I was going to, and I wanted to pick up my French skills again. And then I've since moved back to Italian. But a lot of my students too have Twitter accounts, and they follow, for example, musicians or actors or actresses or sports players that they like, and that gives them that access that they need to wider reading. Occasionally they tweet as well, depends on the students. But I think that some advice I would give if people wanted to use social media is to follow famous people that you like. And some of them follow, for example, news accounts. If they have any friends who are using their target language, they can follow them. And there are a lot of English study accounts if they prefer to use something that's designed as a learning tool. So, for example, this one here at PhraseMix, or Fluent U English is another one, or Espresso English. These are the kind of things students could follow on Twitter if they're interested, or if they were using Instagram, they could go to um, sites like the BBC Learning English. When they do that, it's a habit for many of my students just to be flicking through their social media. And when they're scrolling and then they see something that pops up, if they have the mood, the right mood, they might click on something if they've already followed it, because they'll see it when they're scrolling down. And that's exactly how some of my students described it to me. Sometimes they've targeted certain accounts and they've made a commitment to check it every day. But other times they've just decided to follow, and every now and then when they see something interesting when they're scrolling, it's kind of incidental learning. They think, oh, that looks interesting, and they start doing it. I think though, in my case, that's why I have multiple accounts, and also in the case of some of my students, people don't want to study with their private account. They don't want to mix up different things that they're doing. So something I've suggested to students is, why not make an extra one, an extra Instagram account or an extra Twitter account or whatever other social media they're using. Why not make one that they just devote to their foreign language or their foreign languages? And you might be surprised to find this one here. Google Translate is very hit and miss. I'm aware of this. I know that Google Translate can be terrible. I've seen some horrific translations come out of Google Translate. But it can be helpful for pronunciation to a certain extent. And I've used it with success to work on my French and Italian pronunciation. So I wonder if it may be useful to people from other language backgrounds who want to work on the English pronunciation. So if students or learners have the updated version, there'll be a part that says it's crammed together because the screen's so small on a smartphone you can't read it all. But the first one is camera, the second one is handwriting, the third one is conversation, and then the fourth one is voice. Now, the idea behind conversation is there's supposed to be two people speaking, and the phone's supposed to be in the middle as the translator. It, in reality, you can use this by yourself. It's just that it cuts off a lot because it's expecting another person to talk. So when you stop to take a breath, it starts translating and it's done. What I recommend for students to do is use the voice part. And when you press the voice button, you'll get a screen that looks like this, and it says speak now. And when you speak, this is what I said. I said, this is very useful for checking pronunciation, and it understood me. It wrote down what I was trying to say. And then after that, it will give a translation. Now, the translations are not the point of this activity because they're not always good. But from my own drilling, using this to I don't know, I used it for a number of months fairly intensely at some point when I was in a position that I didn't have anyone to talk with really in Italian. And I had no way of knowing if my pronunciation was right or not. I would play, um, I would type in what I wanted to say in Italian. Then I would press the play button so I could listen to what it was supposed to sound like. And then I would try to say it myself using the speak button. And at the beginning, it was a mess. I could not do it. It did not understand what I was saying. And there are still some sounds I can't make well, and it still doesn't understand. But it understands a lot better now. And that's because I've been able to do a lot of practice with it. The other thing is when I want to send voice messages to people in Italian, I often go to Google first and I check the pronunciation of words I don't know how to say properly. And then I do a quick drill with it before I go and leave the voice message because I want to be understood. And students could work on their pronunciation in this way too when they're coming up with words that they're unsure how to say. And I mentioned just now about if I'm trying to send a voice message to someone. So that brings me to the next thing, and that's language exchange. There are a whole lot of different apps and sites that you can use to connect with people who speak your target language. And some of my students have been using this one. Other students have been using a site called Tandem. And there was another one called Lang8 a while back that was popular that students were using. But this one is one that I've tried out myself. So I can speak for it from the point of view of a teacher who's had feedback from students. It was actually a student who initially told me about this. And then it was a colleague who used it for studying Spanish. And now it's myself, my own experience. And in this one, you can either use it on your computer or as an app through iPhone or Google Play. And the way that you do it is you write something. You can see I only have in Italian. The content's not so important here, but you can put up like a picture if you like, and you can write something, or you can record your voice. Can you see down the bottom where it says "Please correct me"? Every time you upload something, you have a choice of what your topic will be, and if you want people to help you, you can put "Please correct me," and then people who speak Italian, like this person here, who I've covered with Mosaic, they will go into the app and they can see your sentences and they can press a button that allows them to edit. And you can see that I made a mistake with the red part and they said it's not un altro, it's uno. Okay. And then the same part here, era possibile di, and it's no, it's not era, it's è stato. So they help in that way. And they can leave notes too, like down the bottom, you can see the note is sei stata molto brava, which means that you were great. Keep going. So you'll get encouragement from other people as well. You might not get correction all the time. Some people might just respond to what they read. in terms of a, human to human interaction, a conversation about it. So it's an opportunity to be able to use your target language with other people and to get feedback from people who are proficient users of that language. And I found it very useful for that. You also have the opportunity to um, have one-to-one conversations with people in the way that people use Messenger, for example, or the private message in Twitter, for example. So there's a kind of hidden part, and then there's the app-wide public part. If you put something here, everyone can see it. Now, I mentioned to you earlier the importance of security, and to introduce something that I think has a potential for language learners to meet people who might take advantage of them, I think that it's important to mention security issues. And I showed my students the privacy settings and how to manage them. So you can turn off your location so it doesn't show where you are. You can hide your age. You can hide when you're online so other people don't know. You can make it so that nobody can call you, that they can't find you by email, etc., etc. And you have a choice of who's able to search for you. So you can make it so that it's only people who are trying to learn the language that you speak and that are speakers of the language you want to learn. That's an exact language match. You can make it so that it's only people of your own gender who can contact you. People who are worried about themselves or their learners being harassed, sexually harassed, might want to point this one out. And you can change the age range. I put it to the age of anyone who's basically finished university can contact me, and anyone up to 90, I don't mind, but I didn't really want to interact with students. I do that 24/7, through Moodle these days. So I wanted to interact with people who had already pretty much finished university. And you can hide yourself so that you're not searchable, and you can make sure that um, people can't use the search nearby function to find someone who's, you don't want me personally, I don't want to say where I'm located. And I show students that it's possible to hide your location and not have it shown that you're in Tokyo or that you're in a certain part of Tokyo or anything like that. So I think the security side of things is important for us to consider when we're introducing technologies. We can't just look only at the benefits. We have to also look at potential dangers and risks that we could be exposing students to. The last kind of area I wanted to look at in terms of tools was anything that we can find in terms of movies, TVs, and other content. I've just put up a few of them. We could add to this, like Amazon Prime. There's lots of different things. And I put Netflix because it's been a huge thing here in Japan. I've noticed more and more of my students every single year. I find more and more of my students are using it to access content in English, YouTube as well. And myself personally, I've been using Netflix to work on my Italian a lot, and found the advantages of using it to improve reading speed, to gain vocabulary, to improve listening skills. And even in my case, because I'll sometimes stop and analyze things that I find on the screen, even to reconfirm my understanding of grammar points that I happen to be focusing on. So there are a lot of benefits. And with the self-directed learning course, I encourage students to not just to not feel that if they're using something that's not traditionally been thought of as formal education, for them not to think that that's not valid learning, that there's many things that they can do that are valid activities to develop their learning skills. So the use of things like Netflix and YouTube, if they have a YouTuber that they're interested in, or if they want to access interviews with people that they admire, like sports players and so forth, they might use these things. At the bottom, there's TED, and I think that probably everyone who's here has heard of TED or possibly used TED in their classes, or watched a TED video in the past. It's quite well known. But something that I find that students don't always know about is the interactive transcript. And the interactive transcript can be great because they can use TED as a reading tool. They can just go to the transcript and read. And when they find a word they don't know, for example, if they use it for English reading, they can look at the interactive transcript, read it, And when they find a word they don't know, what they can do is set the subtitles to their own language. And if they click on the interactive transcript on the word that they don't know, it will go to the part of the video that uses that word, and they can see it in their own language in the subtitles. So students have found that useful. I've found that useful too, because it allows for translation in context of the vocabulary that they don't know. So some students are using it just for listening, and others are using it for reading as well, vocabulary development. There's one particular TED Talk that I want to introduce to you all before we wrap up. And that's this one here. Try something new for 30 days. In fact, I'd like to challenge you to do this, to watch this after the session if you haven't seen it. It's very short, just a few minutes. And a quick spoiler, it's this guy who decided that he wanted to change his life. And he thought that small, sustainable changes would be the way to do that. And he tried doing different challenges for a 30-day period, adding things to his life or subtracting them. And he challenges everybody at the end to do it themselves. And at the beginning of the academic year, I do this challenge with a lot of my students. And we choose two things, two challenges. We do an English challenge and we find something small. In my case, I choose a different language, but we have a language challenge. And we also have a non-English challenge, the other challenge. They choose things like fitness. So they might be going to do 15 push-ups a day for 30 days. Or they might be going to challenge themselves to go to bed by midnight every night for 30 days, or to get up by a certain time every day for 30 days. Some of them even challenge themselves, challenge themselves to not eat sweets after 7 p.m. for 30 days. They have lots of different things that they're interested in trying for the non-English one. And for the English one, they might choose things like listen to at least one English song every day for 30 days, something small. And we often do this at the beginning before we get into the bigger planning stages in the course, because it's something that they can build a bit of momentum with at the beginning when we're going through the stage of the language learner history and some of the different materials, introducing the idea of smart plans. We're doing this at that time simultaneously. And by the time we get to those bigger tasks, they've had a little bit of success at trying to make a small change and feeling the motivation that comes, or the reward that comes when they are able to do it, and feeling like, I didn't do it this week for the things that they couldn't do. And asking themselves, why couldn't I do it? Was the challenge too hard? Did I forget? Was I lazy? And reflecting on that. So I challenge you to try this, to watch this video at the end and come up with two plans. One for
Me?
everybody who's watching. But yes, Aziz, definitely you for sure. You got to challenge yourself to do something for 30 days. My challenge for my fitness in August was to walk 10 kilometers a day for 30 days, and I did it. But I love walking, and it wasn't a huge jump for me. But yeah, challenge yourself to
Maybe
do something.
maybe the challenges have to be not within the comfort zone, out of the comfort zone, right?
In the comfort zone's fine. For me, 10 kilometers is in my comfort zone because I walk a lot. But if you don't walk a lot, make it 1 kilometer. It doesn't have to be a big challenge. It should be small. For me, that was small because, I live in Tokyo. I don't drive. I go everywhere on foot. So it was within my zone. When you try this challenge, make it something you think you're going to be able to do, not something that you're going to, kill yourself trying to do. Yeah. So my end of my wrap up, some advice for teachers. I think if you have new materials or new ideas with your students, these are some things you could do. Explain the benefits of the different types. I said of listening tasks here. I'm sorry, I should have made that more broad, of tasks. And demonstrate how different tools can be used, because whether you demonstrate it or you put the students in groups and you get to try it, we do that sometimes. I give them some different tools and I get them to try them out and then come back and give a report back to the other students in the class. Or I get them to try them outside of class and come and talk about it in the next class. or I get them to go to, these days, a Zoom breakout room, and then they teach each other about how to use a tool. So having those demonstration opportunities can really help. And then schedule time for them to try it. So that could be within class or as a homework task for them to do. And I think in terms of the support, I mentioned peer and teacher support as they're doing the task when it's in class. But after they've done it can also be really useful, because there might be problems that came up. You can ask if anyone had questions. You could ask about any difficulties or successes they had with it. So offering that support after they've had a chance to use tools can be useful, and having time for students to share them. And maybe they could record their experiences through a forum or in a, I don't know if any of you use um, social media private groups, or if any of you are teaching face to face right now, it could be a chance for you to do that as a discussion in the class, or in some way to share the experiences. But I've often found that students hearing from each other has a huge impact, often more than hearing from me. So I like to have them to have the opportunity to tell each other about the tools and the experiences that they have, that they've made use of. Yeah. And I'll wrap up there. If anyone has any uh, questions that they want to ask, and they don't want to do it during the session now, questions are welcome now. But if they want to contact me later, these are two ways you can do it. Firstly, through my university's email address. You can follow me on Twitter, send me a private message, or send me a public tweet, and I will get in contact with you. And the last one, the Facebook one, um, it's not so much a way to contact me. It's a place where I've listed some resources, some additional resources. So if you want to look at some other resources that you can use for language learning, then you can go to Ohashi Sensei, and you can find um, more activities there.
So, Louis, that was a very interesting session, really.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you.
so, I have a couple of comments, quick reactions about what
Yeah.
you have mentioned.
Mm, sure.
So, you talked about security issues, especially now, teachers are using a lot of learning management systems.
Right.
They are using, Moodle. I'm not sure about Moodle, but I use it Moodle. But now, what do you think the best practice for making sure that students are secure, the information are secure,
You
the classes, what's going on in the classes? So you
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 mean,
have tried Moodle, right?
we use Moodle. In terms of like that though, in terms of like individual teachers having a role in security of learning management systems, I think our roles are quite limited, because there's generally an administrator, and the administrator will take care of things such as, the level of security required for a password, for example, or the amount of times passwords need to be changed. So there's very limited things that teachers can do in terms of security for the learning management systems. But I think that the role that teachers have in terms of um, the students' understanding of internet security in general, and how they're um, interacting online, and how easily their information is found if they share it online. I think the role we have there is bigger. When they're moving outside of those university controlled learning management systems, and they're moving into the big wide world, where not everybody's there to, you know, look out for their best interests. Their teachers in their universities, they are there to help them with their English genuinely all the time. But when you go into, the World Wide Web, you're not always going to meet people like that. And there are people out there that would like to get your personal information and use it for purposes that it shouldn't be used for. So students have to be aware that um, whenever they're interacting online, that they have to make conscious decisions on how much of their personal information they do or don't share.
That's great. Do you think maybe we should focus on just one tool? Because you have said that there are too many tools.
I
Maybe
did.
just one
Mm,
ICT tool?
well,
Because
I did.
when we surround ourselves with too many tools, we get lost in the sea
Right.
of technology.
Yeah. I looked at how tool use um, went up and down over time in the PhD studies I did with the students in the year that I taught them and the 6 months after it. And I did another study that looked at how students use tools in a year-long self-directed learning course. And it wanes. It really, the usage wanes. It goes up and down. And also the breadth of tool use depended on the students. But typically they regularly used a small number of tools. And some students tried a larger number of tools and they didn't tend to maintain use of many tools all at the same time. They tended to have favorite tools, and their favorite tool might depend on the period of time. My own experiences as a learner reflect this. So, at different stages of my language learning of different languages, I've used different tools. Like at the moment, I'm using Hello Talk daily, and I use a couple of chat tools like WhatsApp to build my Italian skills with people who I know. Um, I've gone to Busu recently, which is kind of similar to um, Duolingo. It's a kind of app that you can use that gives you vocabulary and grammar drills. So I've tried some of those recently, but I don't think that my usage of that's going to be sustainable. It's kind of a novelty for me at the moment. So um, I think that we can introduce a whole range of tools to students, but we have to be very careful of whether or not we enforce usage of those tools. In something like a self directed learning course where you're exposing students to lots of different types of tools and giving them choices, I think that having a wide range isn't so problematic. But if you're teaching students in a required course and you're expecting them to use many, many different tools, it can be an overload. And when they don't have the choice to opt out, that can be really hard for them. So we need to leave choices in students' hands when we can, because they're going to have their own preferences as learners. They're going to want to focus on different skills. They're going to have different strengths and weaknesses in terms of their language skills. So yeah, the short answer is that we shouldn't overload them, but we should give them options.
Yes, options to choose the ones that are suitable to them. Yes,
Yeah, right, right.
indeed. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So, do you think when people learn more languages, they become smart?
not necessarily smart. No, but I think that when you learn more languages, you find it easier to learn the next one. I mean, that, for example, when I
Uh,
started learning Italian, it was easier
yes.
because of my background with French.
Oh, you speak French fluently, right?
No, not fluently. No, the only language I speak fluently is English. But yeah, I mean, I use Japanese in my daily life here in Japan, and I've studied French or used French for many years, and recently Italian for the last three.
Good.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Japanese food?
That's really hard. Well, it's winter now, so there are a lot of hot pot dishes, things like shabu shabu or nabe. It's a great season for it. So, actually, one of the first ways that I sought to improve my Japanese reading skills and listening skills was through recipes. Um, so, when I moved to Japan, I would watch cooking shows and then quickly try to copy
Really?
down the characters, the kanji, and then go to the supermarket and try to find what I'd just seen on TV and try and make it. And it was very hit and miss, but it was definitely um, a way to immerse myself in the language. And I'm doing an updated version of that now. Now that I have better technology available, I've been watching Italian cooking um, channels on YouTube and making things that I've seen on there that look delicious. So it's a good way to listen and to feed myself at the same time, feed my interest and feed myself literally.
Okay, so thank you so much for this great session,
No,
and
thank you.
we will plan another practical one, right? In which teachers can, uh, can practice or can implement the tips or the tools that you have mentioned here.
Yeah, if we do a session in Zoom and people are in breakout rooms and able to
Yes,
interact, yeah, then I think that would be a good way to support any teachers who are interested in learning to use some of the tools that we talked about today, or who would like ideas on ways to introduce them or to adapt them for different contexts and language levels.
okay, so thank you. So we'll plan for another session, okay?
Okay.
So quickly, what are your final tips for teachers teaching, especially in these uncertain times? What are some tips you can share with teachers? Quick note.
Have a lot of empathy for your students and your colleagues, and be kind to yourself, because these are times that are very difficult for many, many people, and there's been a sharp learning curve for many, and it's a case of us all doing our best um, in a situation that is not always easy to deal with. At the same time, there are many opportunities. So I think that we need to take advantage of the opportunities that we find in this time.
Okay, thank you so much. I will greet you in Japan.
Oh, great. I'll be waiting for you. Thank you. It was my pleasure today. Thank you so much.
So, so thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.